Hello and welcome to today's episode of Rawkode Live. I am your host, Rawkode. Today we're going to be taking a look at Vitess, a graduated Cloud Native Foundation project that helps to that aims to help with clustering and scaling MySQL. To join me today, I have Deepthi and Alkin. They are maintainers from the Vitess project and employees of PlanetScale Data. Hi there, how are you both?
Hello.
Yeah, all right. I think what we should do is start with introductions. I'd love to get to know you both a little bit. So, who would like to go first?
I'll let Deepthi go first, please.
Okay.
Yeah, please tell us a little bit about yourself and then we'll move on.
My name is Deepthi Sigireddi. I'm a software engineer at PlanetScale, and I have been with the company for over 2 years, getting close to 3 years now. PlanetScale itself was founded in early 2018, so it's just about 3 years old. I started working on Vitess at PlanetScale in late 2018, and I became a maintainer in 2019. We have a maintainer team with 16 members, and I've been a maintainer since. And in my maintainer role, I communicate with the community, answer questions on Slack, attend conferences, mostly KubeCons, but also other conferences where I give talks about Vitess. I am currently the tech lead, so I also manage the roadmap for Vitess and just am involved in high-level technical and architectural decisions on the project. Alkin?
Wow.
All right. Thanks, Deepthi. Okay, my name is Alkin, and I come from an enterprise world, and I'm an open source database evangelist for the last almost 10 years, a decade or so. And I've been working in the MySQL specific projects and areas for like services companies. And I have joined PlanetScale about 6 months ago and been engaged in conferences and webinars before. So what I am doing at PlanetScale is part of the maintainer team, developer relations, and also a little bit of multiple hats over here with customer success and solution engineering and so on. So I love sailing. So some people know, and that's about it.
Nice. Well, it sounds like you both keep yourself extremely busy. Yeah, awesome. Well, why don't we kind of just take a few moments? I know we've got some slides that's going to explain what Vitess is, why people need it, etc. So why don't you get your screen shared up? We'll move that over.
Let me share my screen real quick. All right, Chrome tab. Hope you can see it.
Yep, it is just coming. There we go. Perfect.
All right. So, okay, we done with the introduction. So PlanetScale, we talked about that was founded in 2000. The significance of PlanetScale is the co-creators of Vitess are actually the founders of PlanetScale. So there is a mutual relation between the Vitess project and the founders. So basically, our creators are the code owners, technically speaking. So a clustering system, we don't call it a clustering system technically. It's actually a framework because it comes in bells and whistles. CNCF graduated project, if you have ever looked into CNCF, there are multiple projects. This is one of the earliest database projects. There are many projects. The list is long and very successful applications over there. And it's open source, Apache 2.0 license. That's important. And we have contributors around the community, around the world also. So it's not actually US centric at all. We also decided to highlight this. It's written in Golang, and contributors should be aware of it. It's a Go language it's used. And Go comes with a lot of updates to existing breed of languages. So we are actually a Go shop. So today we want to talk about the agenda on the architecture, use cases, and how do we actually install, possibly show a demo with you. So let's get into the architecture basics. We have let's go actually talk about the glossary. So we have some terms, which is a database terms, but adopted to Vitess. Vitess is not a database. I need to highlight that. Vitess is a framework, drives the database. So the MySQL in the backend MySQL is still good old, well, not good, but MySQL is great. So it's a great database in the backend. So we don't actually make any changes to the database. Database still remains to be in one piece, but we actually drive the database with Vitess edition. So we call a key space a database, which one when it's sharded. So it actually had to be something other than a database. So when it's sharded, it has a key space ID. It has a primary index and a Vindex that actually knows where the shards are. There's a VT gate, the proxy server accepts the connections, and the VT tablet is the backend server, which pairs with the MySQL database. And there's a topology that knows what's going on within the cluster. So let's talk about a common replicated environment. So we have a database, a sidecar that actually runs the MySQL daemon process, and we call this a VT tablet. So each VT tablet is paired with same host as the MySQL D runs. And you will have multiple VT tablets, and so it's a VT tablet which paired with it has a responsibility of running the database, but also driven by the VT gate. So VT gate is actually our proxy where the application connects to. So when you actually make a connection to the Vitess cluster, you actually go through the VT gate. VT gate is the query serving property of Vitess, and then actually points to the VT tablets. So in a large deployment, you would have multiple VT gates. You don't actually have one. Technically speaking, one VT gate cannot or possibly be responsible for all the queries. We're talking about hundreds of shards in some cases, thousands of servers in behind or nodes. VT gate would also have to scale, and this is how you would actually scale. And then your application connects to the VT gate, and then at that point you need to know where is my data. So in this example, we have a commerce database which is sharded, and it has two shards. And how do we know where that query needs to point to? VT gate knows where your actually data sits. So if you are actually sharded by the customer ID, and then your n number of customers sits on one shard, and then VT gate would know when you send a query to that shard. And you can also have an unsharded cluster within Vitess. This is also something we need to clarify. You do not have to shard when you're using Vitess. Vitess also supports unsharded, just like the good old database applications. But you would also have the benefits of the proxy server, the topology server, and additional products that actually bundled in the Vitess framework. So we actually query your customer ID to that shard, and in this example, we can know where the shards are. So the next thing is the VT gate that actually works with the topology server. So in this example, we have supported topology servers that knows your cluster. So you need to actually store all this information into where they sit and keep them up to date. This allows the Vitess framework to know the state of the cluster at all times. So it actually keep updating if things change or if things move. And in this example, we also say etcd or Zookeeper are supported topology managers. So we are a VT-CTLD is a control daemon. That's another component of the Vitess, and that runs the ad hoc operations and bunch of other things. So since it's a control plane, you need to actually have a way to change things around and apply changes. So VT-CTLD actually is the daemon that actually controls all that. So we said the keeping the state. Vitess knows the schemas, shards, clusters, server roles, and all that stuff as a state in the tuple. So when we look at the control plane, we talked about the VT gate, the proxy server. We also have a built-in backup and recovery, and it's pretty much automated. When a node fails, it takes a backup and then restores it, and then connects the dots, and then replication resumes where it left off. We have integrated failover, which is a very popular known open source utility called orchestrator as a vtorq within the cluster. The sharding schemes are optional. You can actually customize how do you want to shard. You don't actually have to shard by customer ID in that example. There are other ways to do that. Advanced replication options with the vReplication and vStream, these are like components of the Vitess that you actually control how you want to replicate from and to. This is one step beyond the built-in replication that MySQL provides. Of course, there's an online DDL option that when you have to actually do a schema migration or schema changes, or in short, alter table, you would actually still drive GitHub online schema transfer or Percona Toolkit online schema change utility. And this is also driven by Vitess itself, or do a direct apply. In summary, the Vitess architecture looks like this. We have the application server that actually connects to your preferred load balancer, which actually points to VT gate. You're going to say, okay, I have a proxy. Why do I need load balancer? Because you might have multiple VT gates and scale out. So that's why. And then you have VT daemon that controls the architecture, and the topo server knows where things are. And then you have the tablet. The clusters that's driven by tablet with your primary, your replicas, your read-only replicas, and then you can actually scale out based on your application. This is not like this is an example. This is not just one standard application. You may have to customize it based on your workload, we call it. Supported backend databases are MySQL 5.7 and MySQL version 8. And we also have MariaDB support. It does not work on PostgreSQL, and Postgres is not in the roadmap at this time, or there is not much of a development that actually. So we can call Vitess is pretty much MySQL centric framework at this point. You can like in that example, you can have a sharding done on the entire application or part of that application. So there is a mix and match from the community that we know uses not entire, like we cannot say, okay, this entire shop is on Vitess, but where it needed to scale or fit for Vitess is migrated in that. And then the Vitess allows sharding and resharding. So when you shard in the old school, it's you're pretty much stuck. But with Vitess, if you shard, you can reshard, you can change your methods, and then within the vReplication and the tools provided, you can migrate it into new methods. And so the idea is to minimize backup and recovery. Hopefully, I'm not out of time, and we have more resources at these links, and we'll share these slides also.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, there was many more components there than I was expecting. So I just wanted to make sure I kind of understood enough of that where we're going. Like, it says that, so Vitess augments MySQL and MariaDB, right? It's not replacing them. We're still using those standard databases in our infrastructure. That bit has not changed. So, but what it does do is provide a proxy that's going to handle all of the requests that we wish to send to our database, and it provides some sort of hashing key mechanism to shard that across multiple MySQLs, MariaDBs, and I don't even need to worry about it. I think that alone is particularly cool. But then you kept coming with all this other stuff, like the online backups and the restore processes, just all these little things that are really cumbersome when it comes to working with MySQL specifically. I think we've all worked with it at some point over the years. Like trying to scale it beyond a certain point is always very, very challenging. I wish Vitess had existed in 2010, just from what you've shown me there in those slides. So I'm really excited to play with it today and see some of this in action. So, like, I'm curious about third-party tooling. So I'll just throw a few questions out now before we go into the hands-on bit. But if I want to use like a MySQL browser on my local machine and it goes through Vitess, would that cause any sort of problems, or would that just work?
It depends on the tool that you're using. I'm trying to remember what it is that we tested with. There are popular MySQL inspection tools with GUIs that we have been able to get working with Vitess.
Yeah. So I'm assuming that the Vitess proxy just speaks the protocol and it kind of intercepts, tries to understand the query. I mean, does it even do query planning to the point if I do a select across multiple shards that it knows to direct them to the appropriate ones? Is that something that's part of the...
Right. So that's all part of the proxy. It does speak the MySQL protocol and parses the query and uses the parsed query to figure out how to route it. And for certain complex queries, you actually have to do a scatter gather, send it to multiple shards and process the results. For instance, if you're doing some aggregate function in the query or an order by, then that might require additional processing in memory in the proxy layer to send back the proper results to the client.
Okay, that's pretty cool. Like so even if I'm only running against one MySQL, I'm still seeing value in using something like Vitess, even early on in my project. Like just bringing it in, having it there, working quite happily. I still get all of that extra functionality, even if I don't particularly need to drop into the sharding stuff quite yet. Right. Okay. Then I think we should just play with it and then see how easy it is to get working. So let's jump over to my screen share. I have here the Vitess documentation, which we'll use as our kind of guides today. I have Docker for Mac running with nothing, I hope. Yeah, nothing running at the moment. So I see that there's a Kubernetes quick start, there's the local install. Is that fair to say that there's nothing that binds me to Kubernetes to use Vitess? I could use it in more traditional bare metal like environments just the same without Kubernetes? Or is some of the functionality limited to the Kubernetes or runtime?
Kubernetes is not required. There are large installs that are running outside of Kubernetes and large installs that are running within Kubernetes. Mm-hmm. What you do get with Kubernetes is sort of being able to use Kubernetes primitives to manage your cluster versus writing your own tooling. So everyone who is doing it on their own kind of had to write some tooling to schedule backups and things like that. Whereas in Kubernetes, you can do that much more easily, especially because there is an operator for Vitess, which is also open source.
Okay. So my take on the Kubernetes, thank you, Deepthi, for that insight. My take on the Kubernetes is cloud native. So when you do that in Kubernetes, you're already in the cloud, which comes with also a lot of tools and utilities, including load balancer, storage, your uploads, your gateway, your security, your keys. All of that is you're already in. Like, let's say you're using Google and GKE and launch a cluster in Kubernetes, you already get everything at your customization. You can actually set things up and utilize those. If you're on local, then you need to figure out, okay, what's my storage? How do I get a load balancer? Where do I run another node? Let's say you need to run an application. Are you going to run it on Kubernetes, or are you going to actually launch a virtual machine? But you still need a cloud. In that case, if you're in the Kubernetes, you get all that. The other thing is, like Deepthi said, the operator. If you have an operator, which means many things are automated. So within the operator, there's a logic that runs, okay, if this node dies, bring another node, attach it to your source or primary, and then connect, and then continue as nothing happened, because the nodes can die in Kubernetes, right? That's normal. But in your local, if a node dies, then you need to figure out, okay, what happened to that, right? And that there is not much of an automation in that sense. So those are the difference, and the pros and cons of the learning curve versus the old school and how you did things in the past, right?
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, you're right. And I'm a big fan of operators in general. I think they, taking, all that experience from people like yourself that are running these things or have done in the past and trying to encapsulate that into a binary that I run on my Kubernetes cluster to make my life easier. I am all for that. I will take all the operators that exist out there. Glad to hear there's a Vitess one. So I guess we're just going to click on the Kubernetes quick start for today and get this deployed to my local cluster. So yeah, I can probably. Are we going? Do you want to go with the operator, or are we just going to go with the manifest? Is there a preference there?
We should do
the operator. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'll just clone down this directory. So this is actually the main Vitess directory. Is this just a monorepo then?
This is the Vitess monorepo, and within this we have an example on how to run it with the operator. The operator lives in its own repo.
All right, okay, gotcha. And I noticed there that also, what did I get wrong? Oh, I'm not in the right directory. Example. All right. Okay. It's always my problem when things go wrong. It's always me failing to type basic things. Yeah, I noticed here that it says the Helm chart is deprecated. Is that in favor of another chart, or just something that the Vitess community has decided that Helm isn't the right way to work with it?
The Helm chart predates the operator, and it was useful before an operator was available. Once PlanetScale started working on this operator that they intended to open source, the community decided that they didn't want to support the Helm chart anymore. So at that point, we deprecated it.
Yeah,
I think Helm is great for starting things up, but the operators are much better for ongoing management of Kubernetes clusters.
Yeah, I think if you don't have to maintain a Helm chart, that's a fantastic thing. I maintain some popular charts, and they've actually become a burden now. Trying to satisfy every use case in the world from every user of that Helm chart is no easy feat. Okay, so I am going to deploy, what was it called? Operator.yaml. Yep, there we go.
Yeah. So the operator is on Docker Hub, so it's getting downloaded from Docker.
Yeah.
Notice you didn't need to install any operator source.
Yeah, it looks like it's just installed some custom resource definitions. We've got some service accounts and role bindings. I do see actually a priority class for scheduling. That's interesting. I don't often see that when I install operators. Is that just to ensure the Vitess operator isn't evicted? I guess it becomes quite an important part of my, if I'm running stateful workloads on Kubernetes, like I probably don't want that Vitess operator to disappear. So I think I understand why that's there. Okay, let's move on. So we want to bring up our initial cluster. I'm just going to pop this one open and we'll take a look at what's actually going on here. Okay, so we are requesting a Vitess cluster, and then we have the ability to override any of the images. Is that something that a regular end user would have to do, or is that really just there as maybe a convenient function for the developers of the project?
So what we do with these versions is that on release branches, when we do a Vitess release, we do a compatible example. So that tag will be a release tag versus being latest. And if people are choosing a specific Vitess release to go live with, then they will pin these versions to those releases.
Yeah, okay. And I see some vocabulary that I'm not familiar with in this context. So could we maybe break down what a cell is here?
Right. So in Vitess terminology, a cell is any failure domain. So it can be a group of servers, a data center, an availability zone, a region. Typically, it's an availability zone when you're deploying in the cloud. So here we are basically saying we've got one cell and we call it zone 1 because it represents an AZ.
Right, okay, gotcha. And then we have how many replicas we want. We have some resource constraints and then the authentication model. So should I apply this now before we go through it? Will this take a little bit of time to get up and running, or is it pretty quick?
It should be pretty quick.
Are you on Minikube right now?
It's just Docker for Mac.
Okay. Yeah, it's pretty. Yeah, it should go fast.
Yeah, we'll let it go, I'm sure. Okay, so then we have something called a Vitess dashboard, which seems to reference the cells that we specified. We've got some extra flags, replicas. So do we, when we use the Vitess operator to deploy our MySQL clusters with the proxies and stuff, also get like a UI that we can navigate and explore?
Yes, this UI gives you a view of the Vitess cluster. It will. You can also see the schema, but you don't actually have the ability to navigate down to like a table level with this UI. And it's very primitive, very old. And we have a couple of volunteers who are replacing that. And hopefully that'll be available in the near future.
All right, okay. All right, now we have something
Coming
called,
soon, VT admin.
something called a key space. That seems to tie into the slides that you kind of presented at the start there, Alkin. Do you want to just quickly run us through what we're defining here?
The key space is the database, basically. So we have launching a commerce database with initial db.sql that it runs the tables. So it's going to create three tables in this example, and it's going to build a database within that zone 1 cluster, and then it will build one primary, I believe two replicas around it. Or it's one? Yeah, it's two replicas, yes.
Okay, how much, if I'm coming at this with a new project, like completely greenfield, I haven't got anything yet, I want to go with MariaDB, and I think, well, I'll start off early, I'm going to bring in Vitess to help, prepare for that eventual scale. Like, how set in stone is this configuration of shards and partitions? Like, is this something that I can tweak as I grow as a company, or do I really have to have an idea early on of how to set this up?
Deepthi, you want to answer that, or?
Yeah, sure. So it's not set in stone at all. You can start with unsharded, and then you can update your configuration and roll out the changes. And the operator can provision the new pods for you. And there are commands that you can issue to copy over the data from, let's say you started unsharded, you have one shard and you decide my data has grown large enough. I have a couple of terabytes. I want to break it up into 2 shards. Yep. Then all the commands are available for you to initiate a copy from the unsharded space to the sharded space. And once the copy is complete, to be able to cut over, to switch over the traffic from the old to the new. And that's a core part of Vitess. That's most of the large Vitess installs would not be able to work without that ability.
So I just wanted to make sure I understood this correctly. So I've got my application. I'm running an unsharded. The data it's getting too big. It's too crazy. I now want to horizontally scale this in some fashion. Does my system go offline during this migration? Can I no longer accept writes, or does it do everything like actively while that's happening in the background? What's the burden on me as an operator at that point?
all of the actual data migration happens in the background. And even the VT-gate endpoint that your application is connecting to won't change. But when you initiate the cutover, we'll have to stop accepting writes for a few seconds so that we can cut over to the new primary and then start accepting writes again. So there may be a few seconds when any writes sent by the application to the Vitess cluster may block and then start getting through again.
Okay. You know what?
So in this example that you're actually running, initial cluster example is something similar that it mimics. So there's a story behind this, right? So the story is you have an e-commerce application that started growing. So you already have accepting reads and writes to that cluster. Okay, so this is what you're building. Once you build this, you have the old version, and then what we do is we keep adding on, and then migrate that data within the Vitess realm. But if you had already had a MySQL that's running, and then you decided to go Vitess way, so first you need to come to Vitess unsharded way within the Vitess. So you come from outside and migrate into that. And there's a way to do that also, migrate that like with a replication. You set up a replication and you cut over, and then you fail over to that Vitess after that. So that once you're in the Vitess, then you do one more migration to the unsharded to sharded. That's the story.
Okay. I mean,
so in fact,
sorry, you go.
In fact, in this very example, we'll go through that resharding process.
Nice. Okay.
So we'll be able to see that.
Well, I mean, if it's only a few seconds, I'm a very happy person. So let me like, I think all the things we're talking about, just they sound like great. I can't imagine ever being in a situation where I've got MySQL or MariaDB backing my application where I would say I don't want this. Is it fair to say that anybody using MySQL or MariaDB should just use Vitess by default? Is that the mission?
That is the mission.
All right.
That is the ultimate goal.
There we go. Perfect. All right. So then there's just some secret stuff. We can see we're doing a little bit of import of data. So in theory, you know, we've given that a little bit of time now. I can run get Vitess cluster. We have our example cluster. I always like to run a describe and see what I get back to. So let's do that. And I'm not sure if those are old or new messages, but we got some potentially error stuff there. And let's see if we have any pods. Okay, yeah. So those were just, I guess, as it spins up a new Vitess cluster, it's likely that a few things are going to fail until it becomes healthy.
Right.
But we do have our, we have an etcd, we have the V tablets, we have a Vitess control D, and then the VT gate. So this is my new cluster, right? These are all the components. We kind of got a rough idea of what those all do now. That was quite easy. That was it.
So etcd itself is redundant over there, you can see, and the tablets are also redundant, and you have the other components. Those are stateless, so they're basically single, and the operator is its own driver.
Why does Vitess use etcd?
etcd is not the only option. You can also use Zookeeper, but I'm guessing your question is more of why do you even need a distributed data store, right?
Yeah, why not MySQL or MariaDB? Like,
so we would like to get to using a Vitess cluster itself as the data store for the discovery.
yeah. Okay.
It historically, when Vitess was being built at YouTube, they already had a quote-unquote lock server available from Google. So it was easy for them to say, we don't have to worry about building this part ourselves. We'll just use what is available. But it does definitely make sense to store the same data in a MySQL or MariaDB.
Yeah, I think that would be quite a cool story, you know, bootstrapping Vitess with Vitess. Like, wait, like anyway.
My answer would be non-technical. So it's more the community adopted and best practice kind of thing. People know about it. It works, and it has no like hiccups. And I think this is what drives people to, okay, etcd, fine, it works, and let's keep it. Like this is more like a non-technical in the sense, but there's like the Helm charts and maybe console. There are some technical difficulties the community adopters had, so they actually didn't actually pursue using them.
Okay. Well, yeah, that this is all really useful. I guess I was about to deviate from the documentation. I'm trying to get better at not doing that. Let's stick with it. I was just going to deploy WordPress to go. Let's connect the dots, but I'll behave myself. So we can get pods, which we've done. We've verified everything is running, everything is happy. The documentation even shows here that you will see a couple of restarts. I think that's really good. And then what can we do? So there's a client I can use. Is that what this is telling me now?
Yeah, in that step is one of the things is to setting up port forward. So since you're in the operator and the Kubernetes, you need to port forward how you want to access the Vitess client and the MySQL, which actually is behind the VT gate, right? So you would set up a port forward with that script and set aliases for the VTCTL client and the MySQL on your shell.
Yeah, so it wants me to do that because it wants to create this kind of schema. So how about we deviate then and we deploy, like we don't actually need to deploy the schema, do we? Could we just deploy WordPress and point it to it and walk through that? Or is there something unique about the schema stuff that we should go over?
We don't need to deploy the schema, but we do need to do the port forward because that host port is what you will then give to WordPress. Unless you're deploying WordPress in cluster, in which case you don't need to do the port forward.
Yes, I will deploy it in cluster.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then you can just connect to VTGate with the pod name.
I'm assuming we have a service address, right? Yeah, we do. So would I connect WordPress to the V tablet or the V gate? Sorry.
To the VTGate.
VTGate.
Okay. Okay. So I do have I did have something in my buffer. Let me grab that again. On the official Kubernetes examples repository, they do ship WordPress deployment. So let's just download that. Oh, I need a workload folder. And we should be able to see this here. Let's try again. That's better. So we have our workload folder here, and we have a WordPress YAML file. I don't think I need to. Oh yeah, we'll need to just set the host and stuff like that. So if we're going with the Kubernetes service address, then we want this. That's interesting with the service. So I can see that we're actually getting like a generate name happening here. Why is it not just example VTGate? Is it? I guess I'm potentially going to have more than one VTGate at some point.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So one thing I'm not sure about here, and maybe Alkin knows, is there's an example VTGate and there's an example Zone 1 VTGate. There are two of them. Alkin, does it matter which one we use? Let's just try one and see how it goes.
Yeah, I don't think it matters. Yeah, you can just use.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to drop this in. That's going to be the default. In fact, we'll work without that one too. Okay. And we configured off through the secret, which was in our initial cluster. Can I just grab the username and password from?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's just user with no password. Is that right? Is that what that means?
Yeah, that's what that means.
I'm just wondering if it with an empty string is like the operator going to in some way randomly generate a password for me, but we'll try.
No, no, no.
Oh no, this actually wants a secret. Oh no. I know better than you, Kubernetes. There we go. Password blank. And we'll just set this to. Now we have to play the game. Is it DB user or DB username? So we'll find out. And then the rest of that should just work as is. I don't think there's anything. Yeah. Let's see. So in theory, I can now do a deploy of WordPress. And we'll see if that comes up happy. Hopefully it pulls that image pretty quick. This is normally where I would say Control C and describe it, and then it would say it's healthy, and I was just being impatient, but now I'm going to describe it. One pod has unbound immediate. Okay. Why does that need persistent storage? And why did it not work? Storage classes. Okay, we've only got a close path on Docker for Mac. Today I learned. So let's do host path. I'm not even sure if I can just make this up. We're going to find out. If that doesn't work, I'll remove the PVC and we'll just stick it with ephemeral. I don't really think it's going to matter for what we're doing today. So
Right.
We'll see what happens. There, it's happy. Okay. So I should now be able to port forward to WordPress. And it should have enough information that the wizard we're going to get probably going to fill itself in. I'm saying hopefully.
Ooh, connection refused.
I spoke too soon. Okay, so it's failing to write the database now. Error VT gate. So it looks like it did reach our VT gate, but the VT gate is saying that creating a database is not allowed.
Right.
So what port are you connecting to VTGate?
No, that's not the issue. So I did not realize that WordPress issues a create database. In Vitess, a database is a key space which is backed by all of the infrastructure. So if you do create database, then what you are expecting is that you bring up all of these processes. So I think we have to do the create database manually and then connect it up.
Well, we did actually, right? We did generate a key space. So if I've understood this correctly, the database name is commerce?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to assume very naively that I can just do name WordPress DB name value commerce. And assuming I know how to spell commerce. Yeah, good. Okay. And we don't need that. Yeah. Now, it's not going to have any problem. Will creating the tables or the schema cause any problems, or should that just work out?
No, create table should work.
Okay. So let's try reapplying our workload. We should see a restart. Yep. And we'll just keep an eye on that for a moment. And if that gets us past the create database, then the port forward should hopefully give me that nice kind of wizard screen. There's a lot of hopefullys on this stream. Well, that's better. There. Okay. So, Vitess, Rawkode. I wonder if it's going to let me away with that. Yeah, there we go. And my email address. Definitely don't index this, Google. Okay. that seems
Nice.
so trivial, but at the same time, I want to just emphasize something here. Like, WordPress does not know it's speaking to Vitess. It thinks it's just speaking to MariaDB or MySQL. And I never had to change anything. Is that standard then when I adopt Vitess? Like, if my application speaks MySQL or MariaDB, I should just expect it to work with very little changes. Is that correct?
It depends on how esoteric the MySQL features are that you are using. So certain things, like say show binary logs, will not make sense to send to a proxy. And some complex cross-shard queries still don't work. Sometimes because they are harder to plan and we haven't done it yet. And sometimes because they would be so inefficient that maybe we should not support them. Maybe the application should be rewritten in a more efficient way.
Okay.
But most things should work. Anything that doesn't work is somewhat obscure. And if there is a common thing that doesn't work, then we are fixing it.
Or it's not. It's a new feature. Like there is
Right.
a like MySQL. Like I mentioned, MySQL itself excels in every version, every release, right? So they keep adding enhancements and new features, and those are not always caught up with the framework. And
Yeah, we are definitely not caught up with MySQL 8.0. There are features there that Vitess doesn't understand right now.
Yeah, I mean, this is running MySQL right now. Like, if I wanted to run MariaDB, would that have just been a flag in my cluster.yaml?
Yes, we will need a different build,
Right, okay.
a different image.
Yeah, I mean, my personal preference is MariaDB, but that's just mine. I try to avoid anything that's got Oracle branded and stamped on it. But other than that, that's people are welcome to use what they want. Okay, that was really cool. I'm really happy with that. So I think we kind of covered what's this, not what's the same, but we've hooked up an application that didn't require any changes to work, other than that little caveat about, well, you have to create your key spaces as part of the operator and the cluster definition. I think that makes perfect sense. Should we dive into what's different under the hood? Can we take a look at the tools and the schemas and how we interact with this cluster? Is there documentation for that, and I'm just making things up? Is there something you want to point me to here?
So
Alkin,
what do
is
you
there
have
something specific?
what do you have in mind? Like, what would you like to see?
So yeah, I'm just curious. Like, how do I take a look at? You said there was a UI. Shall we take a look at that first?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, so I'm gonna run get pod. This is where everything is. I mean, I don't see something there that says UI. Is that something we have to deploy separately, or is it just a port on one of these other components?
It's a port on that VTCTLD component.
This one. Okay. So if I describe this, learn to spell describe first. Let's take a look at the ports. So 15,000 or 15,999.
15,000 is the HTTP port.
Okay.
15,999 is the gRPC port.
Is all communication in Vitess over gRPC?
Pretty much, yeah. There is a JDBC driver which you can use to talk to the Vitess cluster. So from outside, we can speak gRPC, MySQL protocol, and Java. But within Vitess, it's all gRPC as of now.
Why did that?
1 less 0.
Yeah. Okay. So
Let's go to app 2. Let's go to app 2
just like a new and improved
instead of
one.
/app.
Seems to keep redirecting me.
Okay, that's fine then. Yeah, so this is the sort of cluster view. You can see that there is a key space called commerce and it has one shard, and you can click through to that. Click into that. There's a master, which we will shortly rename to primary, and a replica.
The status. Oh, I can't click it. Looks like it's clickable, but it's not clickable.
Yeah, that link doesn't work within Kubernetes.
Right, okay. So I can run health checks. I can delete the tablet. That sounds scary. I hope there's a confirmation on that. And I'm kind of
There
tempted to
is a
click it.
confirmation.
Okay. All right. So if I
And we can look at the.
Sorry, please go.
Sorry. I was going to say we can look at the schema. So
Oh.
schema is viewable from this, though it says there is no schema. That's interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure we have a schema. I'm assuming WordPress has deployed something into this.
Right.
Is there a command line?
So probably there is a command line tool that you can use to do get schema. But my guess is that because the schema was applied by WordPress, it did not make it into the topology server. Whereas if you use the Vitess command apply schema, it stores it in the topology and propagates it to the MySQLs.
Okay.
That would be my guess.
So this is our topology manager here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to keep clicking on stuff.
Which is what I did the first time I saw this.
Yeah, so we can kind of see some stuff about the partitions and the replicas and all that. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So you said there was an app v2, or at least an app 2. Is that something that's currently being worked on by the team? Is that just an improvement on what we see here? Like, what was the app 2?
Well, app 2 is this, but there is a new UI that is being worked on, which will probably have its own starting page.
Okay. All right, let's look at a couple more things then. We'll leave the UI alone for now. I think I've clicked everything there is there now. So I'm curious, now that I have my Vitess cluster here, if I want to change the properties of this, I'm assuming I just work like with my standard Kubernetes tooling and just change the spec.
Right.
Now, where was the...
So,
now, if I just change the replicas to 5, is that okay?
Sure.
Yeah. What else can I break? Let's see. So there's 2 sets of replicas then. We have...
Yes. Can you scroll up a little and let's see what that first replicas is? This, where you are right now, I know what it is. It's the MySQL level replicas. But higher up, that's the number of VT gates. So gateway is VT gate. So replicas 5 will give you 5 VT gate pods.
Okay. So that's not replicas of my data. That's just like... Okay, we don't actually need 5 of them then. That's not the interesting one. So I guess we want to modify the key space here, and we'd want to modify the replicas of the key space to be... Does the number matter? Do I have to have a certain quorum? Does it have to be odd, or does it not?
No, it doesn't matter. Okay. It doesn't matter.
And what
at least 2, but beyond that, it doesn't matter.
Okay. So one of the things I'd like to do then is, why don't we scale this up to 4? Is there a way for us, like, will one of them be considered the leader then, the primary? So
there is already a primary. The operator should just add 2 more and make them point to the existing primary, and not switch to a new primary.
And then can I kill the primary and things will just handle nicely?
Yes, you can kill the primary and one of the others should become a primary. Okay. Let's see. Yeah.
Let's just see.
Let's see.
What's the worst that could happen?
Actually, well, I know what will happen, but we'll see it happen and then we'll talk about it.
Okay. So we can see that the VT tablets are now spinning up. They're going through the init container phase, probably already finished. Oh, too many clicks. We got one error. I wonder if that's just transient though. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Although we did get 2 restarts on these ones. Wonder if that's going up. No. Okay, it seems to have stabilized. So now we have 4 replicas. How would I work out which one is the leader? Would that be going back to the UI, or is there another way of handling that?
You can do command line utility with the port forward if you had the alias.
There is a port forward to
you can connect the VT
yeah.
gates and say show Vitess tablets, and it'll give you which ones are what they are doing.
Okay, now do I do that with standard MySQL CLI, or
Yeah, MySQL CLI, but you need to do a port forward, and
I don't think I have it, but we can get it.
it's in the
other way to do it is to connect to the VTCTLD that, well, we only forwarded the HTTP port, but if we forwarded the gRPC port, then we would be able to do list all tablets, and we'll get a list of all the tablets.
A couple of options, but for if you already are like MySQL user CLI, for me, like remembering the flags are harder because it's new terms, right? But just connect to database and say show databases and stuff like that, so maybe you can explore a little bit.
Yeah, of course. I'm confused.
VT gate.
Did we not have 2 VT gates earlier?
No, we just had one. That was in the service. When we looked at the service, there were 2 services which
okay. Yeah, right. Do you know the port number that I want to port forward?
Yeah, it's 15306.
15306. 15306. Okay. We have our port forward running. We have access to MySQL. I just installed you.
You need to set an alias to your MySQL.
let's
MySQL client.
Oh, okay. You need a client, right?
I'll just export this. I think it just got a little confused. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so now we have a client. So can I just do MySQL localhost -p
Localhost 1503, yeah. -u user, yeah.
I think it's capital H, isn't it? No. Huh.
I think it's capital
right.
P.
Capital P.
For the host?
P is like looking for a password.
For the port number.
Port number, capital P. Yeah. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, it's not trying to use the host. I'm wondering if that H is correct.
Oh, let's try 127.0.0.1 instead of localhost.
Yeah.
Oh, that was closer.
Lost connection.
Is my port forward? Oh, we got a refused there. I'm going to describe that pod just in case. Describe pod, and it was the gate, right?
Yeah.
And the ports. Oh, 3306 then.
3306.
Yes, you need to do. I was looking at that 15306 to 3306.
It's always, you should be glad when it's always those little silly errors. Those are the ones I don't mind.
Yeah.
Now
you can take out the port specification because it's the default port.
I'm in.
There you go.
Show Vitess underscore tablets. Underscore. Okay, yeah.
All right, so we can see we've got our zone 1, we have our commerce database. This is unsharded. We've got 3 replicas and 1 primary. Awesome, very, very cool. Now, I'm assuming these aliases maybe match up with those IDs on the...
Let's check.
Yeah, I don't like getting this many splits, but I'll do it temporarily. Yeah, 3. Yeah, okay, so these are pod names, although there's still a random thing on the end. But
right,
we want to kill 2, 4, 6. So grep delete pod. So what should happen here when I do this? Now we've not got an application that's consistently hitting it, so we're probably not going to be able to like visually see failover. But I'm assuming when I delete this pod, if I run or show tablets again, will we see some sort of status or degradation here? Or will it just immediately switch to offline, and will something else take over?
Well, we will see that so that tablet may not even show up in show Vitess tablets, depending on when we run it, depending on what state it is in at that point. And what the operator does, and this is different from how most people run Vitess in their live installs, is that it's actually so quick to restart the tablet and reattach it to its volume and reconnect it to the MySQL that it doesn't do a failover. It just restarts it. So the pod will simply restart. So we'll see whether I'm right about that.
Guess we'll just wait for this to at least finish, because I guess until kube control tells me the pod's deleted, it's probably not actually gone yet. I wonder if we've already got a new one spinning up. I've got too many tabs, which is usually a new window. Yeah, there we go. So we've got one initializing. We've got 3 replicas now, so we've lost our leader.
We've lost the master, yeah. The primary.
So when that new pod comes online, will it just take over?
It will come back as primary.
Okay. And what if it's away for an hour?
An hour?
Yeah. What if it goes away for 3 days? What if I'm running it on bare metal and the hard drive dies and I shut down the machine?
So what we haven't shown in this example is that you can integrate Vitess Orchestrator, which will actually do a failover.
I don't know if that's stuck. It looks okay here. Will it just take a bit of time before it shows up on the... Oh, no. There we go. It's back.
Yeah.
So what happens with write requests that come in during that time and there's no leader available?
So VTGate, I'm not sure if we've set this up in this example, but VTGate can buffer the requests. And let's say on the client side, you have some sort of a timeout, 15 seconds, assume, right? VTGate will buffer the requests for a specified duration. By default, it's like 20 seconds, but you can set it up to 30 seconds. And VTGate will buffer the requests. If the client times out, the client can retry. If the client doesn't time out, once the primary is back up, VTGate will send the requests again, and they will succeed.
Okay.
There will just be a delay. Something that you expect to take 1 second might come back after 20 seconds or 25 seconds.
Okay. Is there anything else that's interesting to the way the Vitess had? I think Google was thinking I was talking to it. Is there anything interesting that we can show from, now that we're in this kind of MySQL prompt thing, is there any other Vitess specialized objects that we can show, describe the schemas, anything like that would be useful to the people viewing at home?
I think we can also do show Vitess key spaces.
And would that be describable? I can't even remember if this is real MySQL syntax. I'm kind of just making that up.
No, it's... oh. Nope, not yet.
No, you can say use commas and say show tables.
Yeah, in fact, you can do show tables even without doing use commas.
Yeah. And but we didn't actually select the default database. That's why when we connected, it didn't actually have. Yeah. So these are these are the tables that initial setup created in the commerce database.
Right. WordPress itself
Yeah, that's
created all
WordPress
those.
metadata. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So one of the things Vitess can do is you can actually have multiple key spaces and have a VT gate that spans those and have the illusion of a single database as long as the table names don't overlap. So sometimes what people will do is instead of sharding, let's say instead of having many large tables or a few large tables, they have many small tables and the overall database size is big. Then you can split those into multiple MySQL databases, give each of them a different name. And at the Vitess level, you'll get the illusion that they're all still in a single database, as long as the table names don't collide.
Okay.
That's actually super cool. I mean, there are like few blog posts about this, like million tables in one database, like million tables. Like the customer create a table per customer, so every customer gets one table.
Table per user.
Table. I've seen that also. Table for users also another practice that just to try to scale out,
I think,
but eventually they have a problem managing that many objects.
I think that's a really interesting use case. I'm in Europe where GDPR is a really big thing, and companies are looking for ways to segment and isolate certain countries' data or certain, cities' data or certain, even not, maybe per user to a certain degree. Like they really want to just be able to make it easy to wipe that away after the GDPR timeframes, etc. So I could see a lot of really interesting use cases for adopting that VT gate across multiple case-based things. That would be very interesting to me, definitely.
That's even lower level than the zone and the cells. So you actually have the zone. Let's just in GDPR case, you can actually zone out all the countries, right? And then you can actually set them on a cell per data center, like availability zone, and then drill down even further by region, by state, county, or that, and then you can all do that within this design. So the extremely interesting use case.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure I understood that correctly. Like if I'm designing an application where users can register and I want to store all of the people that are in the US and a US zone, I want to store all the European people, maybe in like a London zone, and then I want to I want to be able to break them down by user type and say I break them down into a key space each. So you're saying that I could run a VT gate in each geographic location, which would handle the request for that specific continent?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Cool.
So Slack actually does this. They have the data locality. When you create a Slack workspace, you can choose which region you want your data to reside in. And they use Vitess and they are doing it.
And are these VT gates aware of one another? If I make a request from say I'm traveling, right, and all my data is hosted in the Scottish data center, assuming we have any, and I'm in Amsterdam or California for a business trip, and I log in to the VT gate there, does it know to move me over there, or would it fail? Like what would happen?
That's a good question. You can set up the VT gates to be able to access data in other zones, but there'll be a latency.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know how long this will take, but I'll suggest showing one more thing. If we think it's going to take too long, let's just not do it. We can go back to the documentation and maybe actually stick to what we were going to do for a while. But when we created this key space, it was unsharded, right? So if I run that command again, the show key spaces, show tablets. Yeah. This dash here means unsharded. Is that right?
Right.
Can we shard this?
Yes, it's documented. We can look at the documentation to see how we should do it.
Okay, that's fine. Let's see. Can I just search?
So we should go back. We should go back to that guide that we were in, and there's a link from there to go to the next steps. So get started. Vitess operator.
Yep. Next steps. So is the move tables?
Let's click on move tables. We don't need to do move tables because we are not trying to split the existing key space into multiple key spaces. We just want to shard. So we can go all the way to the end and resharding. Yeah, that's what we want to do.
So my resharding idea is in the advanced track. Okay.
So the part that takes time is to define those indexes for all of the tables. And with WordPress, there are quite a few tables. So for each of those tables, you ideally need to inspect the schema, pick a column, pick a index type. Hash is the most common, but there are multiple index types.
So it'd probably be very beneficial if I even knew what the WordPress schema looked like. It's kind of
so in WordPress example I looked earlier was you have a blog site, right? So you would keep one unsharded key space for your metadata, but for the blog, you would actually have a sharded key space by the blog ID or comments users that would need to scale. You don't need to scale your metadata because it only like keeps track of users, how many they liked, how many they commented and stuff like that. But what you need to scale in that example is the number of comments from the users, right? You actually have to split them up so that they don't actually stack into one area. So that's why there is some assembly required before you decide a shard on what type of sharding you want to do on those. And Deepthi's comment on hash is very common because that way you can say, okay, I want n number of shards and shard them by hash, which is a kind of easy way of doing it.
And it usually gives you a pretty good distribution if you're hashing a numeric field, because that's important when you're sharding. You don't want some shards to be overloaded and some shards to be very sparse. But Alkin made a great point. I skipped over the move tables thinking that, okay, if you want to reshard, then you'll reshard all tables. But no, not necessarily. Some tables are always going to be small. So you will move them out into a key space that you don't intend to shard, and then you'll take your main key space and shard that.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, I'm not confident in my ability to work through the WordPress schema and try and identify how we should shard that. So if we were to take a look at one more thing, is there anything that either of you would like me to click on here and lead me towards?
I think the one thing I want to talk about is hot row protection.
Okay.
So Vitess does query consolidation. So let's say that many clients are looking for the same thing. I don't know, top voted comment or something. Everybody wants to click on the top post, right? Vitess can detect that there are many queries which are identical, including the bind variables. And there's no need to send each and every one of those queries to the underlying MySQL. If one of those queries is in flight, then you can hold everything else, wait for the result from the first query, and send that same result back to your 1,000 or 10,000 callers. So these are this is one of those features that makes Vitess useful regardless of sharding. Even if you are never going to shard, you're still going to get some protections from thundering herds and those kinds of problems.
Yeah, I think what I've seen in the past when people are trying to do something similar to this is that they're usually bringing in another database tool like Redis, and they're trying to like analyze the query and remove any of the variants and then cache them in there, and it's very complicated. But is that something that by adopting Vitess I get? Is it something I have to enable? Do I have to tweak it? Like, is that running already in our setup just now?
Query consolidation is on by default. You would have to turn it off if you didn't want it for some reason.
Okay.
What I would like to highlight is we talked about backup recovery. It actually did, like, in order to, if you were like old school DBA, in order to build a replica, if your node died as a DBA, you would actually had very hard time trying to figure out the coordinates of your replica, your backup. You would actually have to restore it and find it, set those, change master to commands and all that stuff, right? Need to pinpoint. And if you actually made a mistake, fat fingered it, you would actually maybe screw up the entire cluster, roll forward to the wrong position, things like that. The other thing that is in Vitess right now, we are very proud of is the integration to online DDL, which is also another operational, not headache,
Nightmare.
but
Nightmare.
as an operational DBA myself for the last 25 years, it's a pain, right? And you do just all you want to make a schema change, which is very common. And with online DDL options, you actually can utilize one of those utilities that are very common without having to lock and impose a metadata lock and actually stop the application doing that. So you can actually test it out. It's built in right now. It's experimental, and we are actually enhancing it as the maintainers. When we say there's a large group of engineers working on it, and you can set the DDL strategy to Ghost or PTOSC, and then do alter table, one of those tables, and see how that goes. And that would not actually, cause any lock on the database while the WordPress application is running, and it would actually apply those changes, and it will be managed, and you'll know the progress of it and things like that. So it's a new development in Vitess world.
Nice, lots of really interesting and cool features there. And there was something that popped in my head just as you both were kind of chatting away there. And like, if I were just running MySQL or MariaDB, like it's, I fat fingered enough databases in my career, and I've deleted a lot of tables by mistake, or even filled databases. Like, and you come to rely on like the binary log and point in time backups. Is that something that I still have access to when I go through the test?
You absolutely have. You can connect to the backend databases. You can mock around, download the bin logs, look, troubleshoot, and audit your database. The database, like I said, database remains as database. It's the backend database, still the good old MySQL. You can access the ports and all the binaries, and the logs, and the binary logs is still there. We just don't do that anymore. We let the Vitess handle all that stuff.
All right. Well,
Vitess itself. Sorry, just one more thing. We actually have a point-in-time recovery feature as well, which is documented on the website.
And it is okay. Let's pull up the website again. Let's take a look at that. So
it's probably in advanced features somewhere, or we should just search for it.
Yeah, maybe. I wonder if I can just point-in-time recover. I like it as well. See, when the docs have a decent search functionality and I don't have to look too hard. So is this taking advantage of the fact that, all of the requests are going through the VT gates, and then you're doing like a multi-write to some metadata store to understand what happened on each individual DB?
It relies on the bin logs.
All right, okay.
So it does require a bin log server so that we can replay the bin logs. So we have periodic backups. So we will find the backup that is closest to the desired time and then replay the bin logs starting from that position until you get to the time you wanted.
Is it a bad thing? Like, if I'm running the test and I skip over it and go directly to my MySQL DB or my MariaDB, does that cause problems? Like, should everything go through the test, or?
Queries don't have to go through Vitess. You can write, update data on the backend, that'll be fine. But configuration changes may conflict with how Vitess wants to run things. So it's not going to be a good idea to do config changes on the backend.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think I'm already sold anyway. Like, I think the amount of features and operational help that Vitess is bringing to people that are working with these two databases, like, it just seems like a no-brainer. Like you probably do want to adopt this technology and use it. And you've already mentioned a few very large company names, YouTube, and there was one other just a few moments ago. But the fact that they're using Slack, exactly right. They're using this technology as well. I think that should give people a lot of confidence, and hopefully it gives them that little peak of interest to go and check it out for themselves. Is there anything else either of you would like to finish with before I let you go and enjoy the rest of your day?
Just quick note on Vitess project. We have a Slack channel, Vitess. If there are questions on Vitess, that is the most active place to ask about Vitess. Even if it's a newbie question, that's like a general channel is great for that. The code is open source. GitHub is a great resource for research and development. And as you already gone through the docs, we already have it. And if there are any questions to either of us or the rest of the maintainers, again, Vitess Slack channel or Twitter is a good communication channel.
All right, perfect.
We are both on Twitter, and there's a Vitess IO Twitter account as well.
Yeah, well, all of the Twitter links are in the show notes. I will make sure that I drop a link to your Slack channel in there as well, so people feel free to jump into the description, join, and have fun with the test. And I'm sure that you'd both be happy to help if anyone does have any challenges or
Absolutely. Of course.
All right, well, I'll let you both go. Please, thank you for joining me today. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.
I'll speak to you both soon.
Thank you for having us, David.
Thank you. Bye.
Yep. Thank you.